Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 240 of the Board Game Barbecue podcast. I'm Def, and I'll be your host today. And with me, I've got another gentleman who I believe was with me the previous time I was on the podcast, wasn't it? With a chip theory person. Hello, Mitch. How are you?
I'm good, Def. You know, when you find perfection, why
you just stay with it? You
stay with
it. What's the point of changing it? I like it.
Yeah.
And by the way, this is the first time in approximately 230 episodes that we're not going to be talking about games with chips.
That's maybe I will.
Cycle, Isofarian Guard. This is going to be the first time. So we also have a very special guest with us today, Clint Warren-Davey. Hello, Clint. How are you?
Hi. Hey, guys. Hello, everyone.
Welcome to the show. Thank you for joining us. We appreciate your time.
Yeah, all good.
So we're going to be doing our normal flow of episode today. We're going to be talking with you, Clint, about what you've been up to, and Mitch and I are very curious to hear about your new design. And after that, we're going to be looking at some announcements and news, talking about our favorite games of the past few days that we've been playing, do our question of the pod, which we forgot to do last week, and then move on from there. So, Clint, tell us a little bit about you.
Well, I'm a history teacher and a game designer, which I do my game design part-time. But I've been playing games for a very, very long time, but only started seriously designing them in the last couple of years. During the COVID lockdowns, I had a lot of time to actually nail down some designs and pitch them to publishers and so on. So I've got a long background with World War II history, but also World War I and the Napoleonic Wars and American Civil War. So I'm really into the wargaming side of things, but I also really like a lot of classic Euro games. So I love Catan and Caylus, Agricola, all those real classic Euros. And I've got my friends into gaming through those. But where I'm really at is the war games, especially the Coin series and all the classic GMT games like Paths of Glory and Twilight Struggle, all those ones. And the designs that I'm working on at the moment, the first one is Werwolf, which is the one that's available for pre-order now from Legion Wargames, and that's my alternate history 1945 Germany coin game. It's not an official coin game. It's not a GMT product. It's going to be released by Legion Wargames, but it's still basically a coin-inspired game. And then right now I'm working on another game which we will be hopefully released next year called Division Commander, which is a solo kind of like a cross between a war game and an RPG where you play as the division commander of a World War II division over the course of a series of missions.
Not one, but both of Mitch's eyebrows were raised.
Yeah, I noticed that. He sounds interested. He's a potential customer.
Definitely a potential customer,
Yeah, that sounds amazing.
Yeah, and then the other one I'm working on right now is a little side project. Is I sometimes do small postcard games or single-page games or games that can be summarized as a single PowerPoint presentation to do in the classroom, so for other teachers. So I do these sort of mini games. I do a lot of mini games, and I'll very often put them out on Twitter. I just say, if you want a game, send me a DM and I'll send you a game. And I'm working on one now on the Gallipoli landings because it was just Anzac Day recently. And I've got a friend in Sydney called Kieran Oakley, who's a game designer as well, who's made a brilliant game on the Gallipoli landings, but it's a very, very big game. And I'm trying to sort of distill that down into a single A4 page game that I could have distributed to high schools to get kids learning about Gallipoli, but also maybe as a commercial product. Because every Anzac Day, I'm thinking that it would be really nice to have a 1 hour war game that you could play with friends that are not serious war gamers, but they're interested in Gallipoli and our Anzac heritage and they want to learn about it. So that's what I'm working on as a little side project now. But basically, Werewolf and Division Commander are taking up most of my efforts at the moment. And then this Gallipoli game is a nice little side project that I'm doing as well.
That's fantastic. Before we progress with the games, I forgot to mention that you're also based in Australia. You're in New South Wales.
That's right, yep. Central Coast. Listeners. Yeah. So about an hour north of Sydney.
How did you cross from, your, I guess, native history interests from your profession, obviously, to the game designing side? How did that journey happen?
Well, the journey happened basically through, I'll tell you, the exact steps that it took was I saw the movie Saving Private Ryan when I was, about 12. And that was a huge experience. It was like traumatic, but it got me so interested in military history. I was just obsessed from then on when I saw that movie. It's a brilliant movie. I still watch it now. And when I first saw that, I just got obsessed with World War II. And I thought, I don't know if you guys have seen the movie. Maybe you have. It came out in the 1990s.
Yes.
It's pretty old now, but great World War II movie about D-Day and like the 101st Airborne landings, and it's so accurate with all the weapons and the uniforms and everything. So I got obsessed from there, and this has been a 20-year obsession. And from there, I got into Axis and Allies, which is my first real board game. So I'm talking the old, like 2004 edition Axis and Allies, which is really based on the 1984 edition Axis and Allies. So that's what I got into board gaming in general. That was like my first game was that.
Wow.
Yeah.
And you stuck around.
And I stuck around. And now I have Axis and Allies Global, which is the Pacific 1940 and Europe 1940 that you join together into a giant world map. And then I've got a couple of friends who are history teachers, and every school holidays we play a giant game of Axis and Allies, and that's a lot of fun. But yeah, that was my first game. And then from there I got into the, I guess, more serious war games over time. And then from wargaming, I also got into Euro games as well. I don't know, I just discovered how big the hobby is, and yeah, I've got a massive shelf of games now, all different types, all different kinds of games. But my really, the core of what I'm interested in is World War II wargaming. So that's my thing.
So you mentioned that Werewolf is a alternate history. So explain to us. Well, first of all, give us a little bit of an intro into the game and what it's about. But then, how does the alternate history weave itself into the real history?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I got the idea because a week after playing Cuba Libre for the first time, so Cuba Libre, introductory coin game, like the smallest coin game so far, I heard a podcast, some history podcast, and a guy on the podcast had said, it's not like there were werewolf IEDs blowing up American Jeeps in Germany in 1945. And I heard that. I said, what does he mean by werewolf? What does that mean? So I just Googled the term werewolf, and I found this whole history of this thing that I'd never heard of before, which was after World War II ended, there was still basically Nazi terrorists and insurgents who had kept fighting, even as late as 1947, 1948. So the Americans and the Russians had occupied Germany, but they were still squashing insurgents all over the country and locking them up and having to denazify the country in a lot of ways. And these werewolves, who were basically a combination of SS fanatics, Hitler Youth members, and ordinary German civilians who had been encouraged to take up arms and resist the invaders, they probably killed in the area of about 1,000 people after the war. So it's not a small thing. Like this is a real thing that actually happened, and it forced the Americans and the British and the Russians to be very brutal in the occupation of Germany. To give you an example of this, if you know much about military history, the US went into Vietnam in the 60s, it's gone into Afghanistan in 2001. In all those cases, it's been unable to quash those insurgencies, right? So the US,
the insurgency has been constant.
It's a constant of warfare, right? The Americans went into Germany, they expected this massive insurgency. They expected the werewolf movement to be this huge insurgency. It was a lot smaller than they thought it was, but they still had to devote effort to crushing it, right? So they rooted out these Nazi insurgents, and they locked them up, or they killed them, or they hung them, or they got rid of them. But the expectation in 1945, when the American army was going into Germany, was that they were going to have 2 million ex-Nazis out of their SS and Wehrmacht uniforms melding back into the civilian population, and they thought there were going to be IEDs on the road. There were going to be snipers. They were going to be poisoning the water supply. American soldiers were told not to fraternize with the enemy. They said, don't go down a dark alleyway at night. Don't drive your Jeep down a highway on your own. You don't know what's going to happen. So the American army was fully expecting this to be basically like Vietnam. Right? So as they're going into Germany, they're like, this is going to be a prolonged, it might even last a decade. Right? We might still be here in the 50s fighting Nazis in a guerrilla war. That was the expectation. It didn't happen for a number of reasons. But what I'm exploring in the game is, what if it did happen? So in other words, what if the worst fears of the American army came true and they were still fighting an insurgency years after May 1945?
Yeah, okay.
Which is, I call it alternate history. It's actually very, very plausible alternate history. And I've tweaked a few things in the timeline. I've added a few things. But basically the events in the game are historical events that we've twisted slightly to fit into this alternate timeline. So it's a coin game. It's a 4-player coin game. And you're coin inspired. It's not a GMT product. Can't call it a coin game. It's coin inspired. But if you played Andy and Abyss or Fire in the Lake, you'll be very familiar with the mechanics. Yeah. But it's set in World War II Germany. So the cards reflect that, and the factions reflect that, and there's it's a more of a high intensity insurgency than what you'd get in like Cuba Libre, right? In Cuba Libre that you've got like fairly small amount of open conflict. There's not really attacking. You will have these occasional scuffles over like cache markers and things like that. Werewolf is like a high intensity insurgency. So there's there's more combat going on, and there's more ambushes and assassinations, and there's more tanks, and there's more stuff going on.
Yeah, more like maybe Falling Sky or Pendragon, where the conflict is a lot higher than these other.
Fire in the Lake is a good example too. It's kind of like Fire in the Lake, or kind of like that. Yeah,
just played that last week. Actually, you answered the question that I wanted to ask, but also our Patreon members asked. Kenny Michael Otten, who is a designer as well, he just finished his campaign for one of his games called Scrap recently. He asked about, given this is an alternate history game, how do you come up with the events? Because the event deck is so important in these kinds of games. They drive the gameplay in a way. How do you come up with events? But I think you answered most of that now. You've used real events just with a bit of a twist, with a bit of a
basically
different flavor.
There's 100 event cards in the game, and basically all of them are real events. So it's an alternate history game, but every event is a real event that's been twisted slightly. And when you add up those events being twisted slightly, you get this totally different historical timeline that veers off in different directions every time you play.
Right.
A whole bunch of different things can happen. But they're all plausible events. There's only a couple that we've like made up, I guess. One of them is that we've got a card in there based on a series of novels by Philip Kerr, who wrote this sort of alternate history novels about a detective in Germany during World War II and after World War II called Bernie Gunther. So he's this like film noir detective that goes around solving crimes in the midst of the American occupation. So we've got a card in there for this German detective, and he's a fictional character. But aside from him, every other card is a historical event.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
So did you pitch this to GMT?
Yeah, I did. I did pitch it to GMT. I sent him an email, and I said, look, this would fit very naturally in your coin series. They considered it for a while, and they said, we've got a lot of other coin games in the pipeline at the moment. This is when they was working on Red Dust Rebellion, The British Way, I think People Power. They already had 3 coin games in the pipipeline. And so I think that's why they said, no, we don't need another one. But that's fine. I just pitched it to some other publishers with GMT's permission. I said, like, I'm going to be pitching this to other publishers. Okay, go ahead. And Legion accepted it. So did a few others, but I went with Legion.
So we should tell listeners, if they want to have a look at the game and pre-order it, the pre-order price is pretty good. They can go to legionwargames.com is where they can find the pre-order page and some information for the game, and also the map and a few other things that you can have a look at and get a feel. I think even the rules are there.
Yep, rules are there, the map's there. And if anyone has any questions about the game, just contact me on Twitter. That's where I usually am online, and I'm happy to answer any questions from anyone on there. But yeah, I've done a few interviews, and we've got a fair bit of material on the Board Game Geek page for the game, and there's a fair bit of material on the Legion Wargames page. There's tons of info out there. So yeah, I still need a few more pre-orders. So very happy to have some more people jump on there, but I can pretty much assure everyone that it will be made this year. It will be a physical product this year.
That was going to be my next question. Yeah. When do you expect the game to actually be published?
Yeah, it should be done this year. That's the plan.
So you mentioned that there's ultimately 4 factions. I'm assuming you've got the Americans that would be one faction, and you got the werewolves another.
Yeah.
What are the other two, and how do they interact?
Which is actually really cool. Is the Soviets. So you've got Germany's divided in half. You've got the Soviets occupy the eastern half, the Americans occupy the west. So yeah, we have the Cold War in there as well. That's another cool thing. So a lot of the game is actually about the Cold War in the early stages. So the Americans and the Soviets are competing for getting the remnants of the German nuclear program to fund their own arms race and like their space program, and they're competing for influence so that the Soviets are building up communism. When they change the population to their loyalty, it means they're making the population communist. When the Americans do it, they're making them democratic. When the werewolves do it, they're making them Nazi. So you actually have a 3-way ideological split among the population. So you've got Americans, which we call the Allies. It's also the British and the French in there. The Soviets, the werewolves, and then the 4th faction is Edelweiss, which was a real thing at the time. The Edelweiss Pirates were a youth movement, anti-Nazi, anti-communist youth movement. But we've actually merged them together with all of the other anti-Nazi guerrilla movements that were around in the 40s. So including the Black Orchestra. So you may have seen the Valkyrie plot, which is like they made a movie about it with Tom Cruise. Yeah, so these guys, like basically Prussian aristocrats who were very high up in the Nazi regime, some of them members of the Abwehr, like high up in German intelligence, they're trying to assassinate Hitler. We've taken those guys, the Black Orchestra, and they are the leadership class of the Edelweiss movement. So and it's say like the White Lotus movement and a few other things like that. All the anti-Nazi groups we've merged together under the banner of the Edelweiss movement. So they're an insurgent faction. They're guerrillas. They hate the Soviets. They don't like the Americans, but they're kind of willing to work with them because they have some similar goals, and they hate the werewolves.
Right.
And they're trying to basically become the legitimate government of Germany. They're trying
I was going to say they're pro-German but anti-Nazi.
That's right. Pro-German, anti-Nazi, yeah. And their main enemy is the Soviets. And they're willing to cooperate to some extent with the Americans and with the werewolves. But they're really doing their own thing. Yeah. And they're a really fun faction of players. Like we've got that faction is like it includes the Brandenburg division and the Abwehr and like sort of Wehrmacht veterans who had fought on the Eastern Front, as well as the youth in the cities of East Germany. And it has a few nifty little abilities. It's got very effective terror. It can do false flag attacks where it raises Cold War tensions. Like the Edelweiss guys are trying to trigger a war between the Soviets and the Americans, so they like ramp up tensions between them by capturing their uniforms and attacking the other side and making them think it was the Soviets or the Americans instead. So they're actually my favourite faction to play as. When I play at 4-player with my little playtest group in Australia, that's my preferred faction to play as. And they're great as an introductory faction as well because they have the smallest number of units. So they're the only one that's a little bit out there. Like they're not made up; they're just a merging of several groups into one, which is very common in the Coin series. Like a lot of the factions in Coin are actually mergings of 3 or 4 different insurgent groups that they've just grouped under one banner, like the warlords in A Distant Plain, for example.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah,
absolutely.
All right, mentioned. Go ahead, Mitch.
I was just going to jump into one of the questions from our community. Paul has advised what are the advantages? He's asked, what are the advantages or the benefits you've seen through your time working with Legion Games and what they've offered in terms of being a publisher?
Well, the guy that runs Legion Wargames is Randy Lyon. He's a guy from the States, and he is very willing to take on new designers who do not have a reputation yet. So I was in that boat. It's kind of my first commercial design that I'd actually pitched, and he was willing to take us on. And that is very valuable because you need to get your foot in the door as a designer. You need to have something out there before other publishers will take you seriously. So Randy is willing to take on people that haven't had a published game yet, which is very, very important. And he's also willing to give the designer a lot of creative freedom in terms of the design, the graphics, and whatever. The only downside to going with Legion is they're a smaller company. So their marketing is not as big as GMT. Their footprint is not as big. But as a designer, it has been great because it has allowed me to get a product out there, and I have a lot of control over the direction that product goes in.
Oh, that's good. Yeah. And being from a little country on the underside of the earth, they I dare say it's probably a little bit harder again to sort of crack into that sort of market or any publisher really, because they're sort of.
If you're an Australian game designer, and if you are an Australian game designer, please reach out to me on Twitter so we can work together because we all need to sort of help each other out here. But there's a limited number of publishers that operate in Australia. You really have to go to the US for a lot of this. And a lot of US publishers are not willing to take on a brand new designer from the other side of the world if they've never heard of them.
Yeah, and even we've said this sort of before in the past. We just try to do our best to sort of support Aussie product and support Aussie designers, content creators, anyone who's contributing towards the industry and the hobby. But we've also sort of made a comment that the Australian designers haven't really broken into the sort of heavy game range. A lot of the existing sort of established Aussie designers are sort of hovering around that midweight, lightweight.
Yeah. I will point out there is one big exception to that in the wargame world, which is the Australian Design Group, who made World in Flames. So World in Flames is one of the biggest World War II games in the world. It's massive. A friend of mine's got it. It's huge.
Yeah.
That is considered one of the top heavyweight World War II games in the world, and it's entirely Australian designed.
There you go.
That's the exception. Yeah, that's the exception that proves it. Also, the Australian design group, they make that World in Flames. But they're the only ones. If you're a war game designer, you're kind of on your own down here in Australia. If you make like you said, you like light middleweight Euros. There's a few.
Yeah,
but I mean, these days, because of the internet, you can do deals and make business with people all over the world. It's possible, but it would be great if we could have more Australian designers and more Australian publishers making good quality games that we can sell here. That would be ideal. And we've got a big board gaming scene in this country, so we should be able to do it.
Yeah, cool. So as a solo gamer, how does Werewolf play solo? How did you come about making that all work together, and what's the structure and mechanics around how it plays solo?
Yeah, well, like I said to you guys earlier, I would recommend playing four-handed solo, like you play as all the different factions, but you can play with non-player factions, which is the bots, and the bots are just a series of flowcharts. So it's like an A4 page flowchart. You follow that, and that's what the faction does. Was considering going with cards, this like in Gandhi. But it's kind of, I don't like that system. It's sort of too fiddly. From a design point of view, it's actually a lot more work to make that and play test it. Werewolf's gone through a lot of play testing, or it's gone through tons and tons of play testing, and to add another card-based system into that is a bit too much, considering I have other designs on the go. But the flowcharts work fine. Like I said, it's rather than having a deck of cards for each faction, you have one A4 sheet and you refer to that. Once you know the rules, I say in the rule book, understand the rules first before you do proper solo. You need to understand how all the factions work, and then you can use these flowcharts. But basically, that's how it works. What I would definitely recommend, and not just for Werewolf, but for any coin game, play it four-handed solo. You play as all the factions. It's just way better. It's easier and it's more fun.
Yeah.
The only reason you would play solo using the proper official solo rules is if you really want the challenge of
that's right,
of winning, and you are one player in the game and you want to win. If you're not fussed about winning and you want to have fun, play as all the factions.
See, I play as all the factions because that way I'm guaranteed to win.
Yeah. Well, you got to pick a favourite at the start. You got to go, I really want these guys to win.
In one of the
don't be biased.
In one of the previous episodes, I spoke about this, and it was a bizarre realization for me, because I love playing games solo, but that's Euro games, so there's usually some kind of articulate or intelligent bot mechanic that either resembles a human play or at least gives you the challenge somehow. And I remember the first one I tried to play solo was All Bridges Burning, but I really got into it with Gandhi because of the card system. I enjoyed the card system in Gandhi. And I played it solo a couple of times. And then I remember having this almost like an epiphany where I was like, okay, well, let's try this again four-handed now instead of the cards. And after I played that, after I had experienced what it's like to play against the bots and went back to playing all factions, I have never played another coin game since against the bots. I love playing all four factions so much. Yeah. And it is something that I used to mock before getting into war games. I was like, how do these people play? What do you mean you play all sides? Where's the fun in that? I'm never going to do that.
I'll take you one step further. I've done 6-player Twilight Imperium solo.
Oh, jeez.
So it is surprisingly fun. It is surprisingly fun. So good to hear that. Werewolf's going to have the same thing.
Speaking of remembering things, Def, I remember a group chat that we had on Discord the day that you were starting to read your All Bridges Burning rule books. And if I remember rightly, there was quite a few colourful words thrown around in that in that chat.
Yeah, it was my first exposure to these kinds of games. And I had all these And I did the wrong thing. I tried to learn the game as a Eurogamer. I wanted to download all the information from the rule book to my brain before I start playing. So I was on our Discord channel, so a few people came on to to see what was happening, and they could see me like tossing paper around and swearing at the game and stuff like that. And
that's great. Hey, I tell you, when I had to play Cuba Libre for the first time, I was the same as you. I thought I'll read the rule book, I'll understand the game before we start playing.
Yeah.
And I read the whole rule book cover to cover, and I was like, I have no idea what's going on. I have no idea what's going on at all. There's a whole bunch of words. I don't know what they mean. And then I played 2 or 3 turns like, this is how it actually works, you know. And that's why, I mean, it goes back to how Volko Runke, who's the original designer of the coin series, he split it up into a rule book and a playbook.
Yes.
It's not the same thing. A rule book is like an encyclopedia. It's like,
that's right.
It just spells out literally what everything does. It's like, you're doing an assault action. That means remove 1 gorilla for every cube in the space, whatever. And then there's a playbook that has an example of play, which is how you actually play the game.
Yeah.
And it's similar to how Fantasy Flight does this too with games like Star Wars Rebellion. They'll have, and also Twilight Imperium has this. You have like a rule book or a rules reference, and then you have a learn to play. So you have like a playbook and a rule. So a lot of companies have done this. It's like you have a rule book, which is your encyclopedia, and then you have another book which teaches you how to actually play it. Yeah, and that's I don't know why companies have gone that way. Like I've done it with Werewolf because it's the convention now to have that, to have a rule book and a playbook. But I think with my future designs, like with Division Commander, I just want to kind of have one big book.
Yeah,
I think and not say the rules, like not spell out the rules in a really encyclopedic, like computer programming way. Like write them out as like a conversation. Like, when it's your turn, you do this. Like, and this
makes it easier to read and absorb, right?
Yeah.
And also, some of these games, I mean, this happens a lot more with war games than it does with Euros, but I remember Mitch and I, being online at multiple occasions, and, he has, set up, I don't know, Fire in the Lake, and I've got Gandhi and whatever else, and 6 hours later, it's like, how has the game going? Yeah, I mean, the second turn. Because we stop and as you're learning the game or as you're playing for the first couple of times, you go through this learn how to play or the playbook that they've got, and they describe the actions that the factions take in a way that is conversational, but also describes the motivation behind these.
Yeah, that's
and that leads you into this massive rabbit hole of the historical connections, and you try and figure out, what happened there, and then you go into this crazy chase of, looking at historic information and things like that. So I think the thematic connection of these games is, the possibility to have a thematic connection is a lot stronger. So we're very keen to see Werewolf playing on the table.
I think it should be fairly clear. Like when you play Werewolf, I would say new players should start with probably Edelweiss or the Soviets. Probably the Soviets, actually, because their victory condition it's very clear what you're doing. Because it's like you take territory, like you're Stalin, you're in control of the Red Army. You're trying to use the insurgency as an excuse to take over more of Germany. You're trying to take over as much land as you can. So your victory condition is control, the loyalty of the population, which is how many people you're converting to communism by force. So you're indoctrinating the population as you go. And then finally, there's an arms race where you're trying to get the research tokens on the map and send them back to Russia. And you want to have more research tokens than the Americans. So it's it's 3 things. It's like military control, ideology, you're spreading communism, and it's the arms race with the Americans, which is that whole Cold War aspect. And it's like you just do those 3, just focus on those 3. If you can grab a research token, if you can take over some land, or if you can make the population communist, do that. And new players go, okay, I get this. Is kind of like, it's very aggressive. It's like, I got to go out and take ground and do stuff. And then when you play the other factions, it's a little bit more different. But it's if you play Fire in the Lake, the relationship between like the Arvin faction and the US, that is really, really hard for new players to get. It's really hard because it's the US wants to build support. They want the population to be like pro-democracy. The Arvin faction wants to siphon away American aid money into patronage, which is corruption. But to do that, they have to have the population being pro-American. They have to have support to use their governed special activity to shift resources from aid over to patronage. So it's like the Arvins sort of want the US to build up support so that they can siphon it away. They both want control,
Yeah.
They both sort of want the population to be in American support, but then the Arvin are trying to go in and take that away when they can without the Americans turning on them. And then that has flow-on effects to the VC and the NVA because their victory conditions depend on control and support as well. But when you have like most coin games, every action you're doing on the board usually has repercussions for all 4 factions. It just ripples around the board, and it's actually very similar to like a really tight Euro design. Like a really tight worker placement game where I put my worker here, and that affects all 3 other players at the map. And it's even more than that because it's a war game. You can actually hurt each other. So that is like a coin game is a really, really tight Euro game where everything you do is hurting someone else or helping someone else immediately and directly if you can see the connections. And of course, new players don't see the connections straight away. That's why it takes you like a good couple of games to figure it out. You go, this is who I need to be making deals with. And every little move you do is affecting everyone else. So that's what's so great about it.
Just to touch on as well, the historical aspect that Def was sort of referring to before, I think that's something that really separates sort of war games, and coin games from other games in the hobby, in the sense that, if you have an interest in the historical aspect, there's a massive depth that you can get into, and that you can, like Def said, I remember the first time I played Fire in the Lake, I literally turned over the first event card and then spent 3 hours reading about stuff on the internet. Because I thought, that was an interesting event. I knew about that, but I didn't know that about that. And so I went to look at it, and then that led on to something else, and that led to something else. And, you end up just spiraling out of control, learning about all this stuff in the game. And you're not getting that out of any other game. Now, sure, there are games that exist in different periods in history, and there are games that have certain historical themes and real life themes, but they're generally things that you can kind of go, okay, I understand that you're from a farm in, the north of Scotland. That was fantastic, and that's about the depth you get out of it.
Yeah.
Whereas these historical war games just give you that, so much historical depth and story and narrative and theme that all ties into it. And I just find it, that side of it for me is what really, really draws me in.
Well, I think even for Werewolf, right? I've got a big interest in World War II as well, because my grandfather served in the Greek resistance. So I've inherited a diary that he kept at the front every night in the war and stuff like that. So I've got a lot of interest in that period. And even with Werewolf, I think, Clint, that a lot of people wouldn't even know what that is. And I think we could get a lot of people looking that up like you did when you first got into it. And the part that fascinated me about it was that there was a big misconception about what Werewolf was. That was, I guess, underpinned by Joseph Goebbels, who basically tried to convince the world this did not exist. This does not exist. This is not a thing.
Yeah, well, Goebbels is he makes an appearance in the game. He's a very important part of it. Yeah, in 2 ways. He's got his own event card, but also the radio Werewolf, which is his radio station that Goebbels set up right towards the end of the war. And he was, so Radio Werewolf was encouraging all German civilians everywhere in the country, men, women, and children, to get whatever weapons they could and attack Russians and Americans and British. He said, Goebbels said on Radio Werewolf, he said, every Bolshevik, every Englishman, and every American on our soil is an affront to the German nation and must be eliminated, basically. Yeah. And it is the duty of every German to fight back against the invader. And the reason that a lot of people didn't take up that message was because they were being bombed, they were starving, they were working 60-hour weeks in the factories to keep the munitions going to the front. So the German population was largely frazzled and war-weary and exhausted and starving. So a lot of them were like, can we just end this war? We're done. Yeah. But not all of them. That message still hit home with a lot of people. And the main premise of Werewolf that we've made, the main alternate history inflection point in the timeline, is that Hitler realizes in 1943 that the war is going to be lost by Germany in a conventional way. So he goes, the Americans and the Russians are going to invade. So let's plan for that, which Hitler did not do. Hitler was like, we're going to win. Right until 1944, he's like, we're going to win. But our alternate history timeline is that Hitler realizes the war is going to be over. So let's plan for an invasion of Germany. So what he does is he directs funding to the SS to build up the werewolf movement. So in our timeline, the werewolves have got between 200,000 and 300,000 well-trained underground operatives, well-armed all across the country. And they're they're basically, if you imagine the Viet Cong, you know how the Viet Cong are actually a pretty well-organized movement in Vietnam. Imagine a German Viet Cong. That's what the werewolves are in our game.
Yeah, right.
On that scale. Yeah.
And I got to say, before learning about your game, I had absolutely no idea that the werewolves existed, what they were, anything like that. I thought we were coming on the show to talk to a guy about had designed a counterinsurgency game with social deduction built in.
Yeah, no, you're getting mixed up with another game.
I kid.
That's Werewolf, and the full title, I believe, is Werewolf Insurgency in Occupied Germany. Yep. So you can go to, if you're interested, you want to have a look at the game, or if you want to pre-order it, you can go to legionwargames.com and help out the publisher make this game.
Indeed.
The other one I'm working on is, I don't know if we have time to talk about it or not.
Yes, I was going to ask you about other games that you've been working on, but also, are these all war games, or is there anything else connected to your exploration of the classic Euros?
This is the next design I'm working on is actually, combines the two in a way, because there's a lot of things I love about Euros and that I'm trying to bring into wargaming. So the next one I'm working on is Division Commander, which is it's kind of like a Euro RPG wargame hybrid.
Wow!
It's like you're playing as the commander of a division in World War II. The first edition is going to cover the 101st Airborne. So if you go, D-Day and then Market Garden and the Battle of the Bulge, they fought in all three of those. So you're in charge of this division. You've got 10,000 men roughly under your command. You've got them organised into regiments and battalions, and you've got officers, and you've got an engineer battalion. You've got artillery. And then you've got to manage the resources flowing to the front. So you've got your fuel, your food, your ammunition, shells, medical supplies. You've got to set up aid stations and observation posts on the map. And then your officers in charge of each regiment over time will build up traits. So they might be an assault expert or a heavy weapons expert or whatever. And so you play through a series of scenarios. Then by the end of it, you've got this division where the units have gained experience and the officers have gained traits. You've lost men, and then you've encountered different events in the storyline. And so by the end of it, you should have a narrative of your division that you've recorded over the space of several scenarios. And then the men that you started with are not the ones you end up with. Some of them have died, some of them have gained experience, some of them promoted.
That sounds amazing.
Yeah, that's the idea. It sounds big and complicated, but it's not. I'm actually streamlining. You can play it in sort of 3 2-hour sessions if you really want to. But the Euro aspect is the resource management. So what I'm doing is, you've got your resources flowing to the front, and one of the players, you can do it up to 4 player. One of the players is your supply officer, and he manages the supplies. And you've got a division commander, an operations officer, and an intel officer. So you're like the commander and his staff. You can do it solo, you can do it 4 player. So 4 player co-op or 1 player solo. And you're working as the staff of the division. And the supply officer is handling the supplies. Operations officer handles what's happening on the battlefield, and the intel officer is handling the intel, which is also a resource that you gain and spend. So your intelligence, which is what you know about the enemy, is a resource that goes up and down. And you harvest this resource of intel by sending your men out on patrol, or by playing cards like aerial recon, or by devoting assets to the intel officer so that he can comb through reports and look at photographs and build it up. So you allocate assets to him to do that job. And then your intel is spent on revealing where the enemy is, where they're going to move, what type of unit they are. So you're operating in a very dense fog of war. You don't know where the enemy is. You don't know what they are. You don't know what they're going to do. And then your intel officer has to gather intel and find that out. And then your supply officer has to make sure the supplies are going to the front. And then your operations officer has to determine where the battles are going to be fought and so on.
Wow.
Battlefield operations. That's the overall plan of it.
Fantastic.
And, hopefully that's going to be by next year. That'll be out. But it's got some interest from the UK military and the Australian Defence Force, and maybe I'll try and sell it to the US military as well as a kind of division planning and training tool.
Yeah, that'd be fantastic.
There's not a lot of games at that level. Yeah. So I don't know if you know about this Sebastian Bay, who made Littoral Commander. I don't know if you've heard of this design through the Dietz Foundation. Okay, so I've got some help from him, but he's an ex-Marine, and he is a war game designer and a professor at Georgetown University, and he makes games that are kind of like what I'm doing. He has been able to sell quite a few copies of his latest game, Littoral Commander, to the Australian British, American, and various other militaries around the world for training officers using wargaming.
Wow.
This is something that not a lot of people know about in sort of the board game world, but armies around the world buy games to train their officers.
That's crazy, isn't it? When you think
about it.
it's
nuts. Just nuts if you think about it. But even Volko Runke, who made the Coin series,
he said that they're using them.
He works for the CIA. He's a CIA intelligence analyst. He has done work for the CIA indirectly. Indirectly, he helps out U.S. intelligence, and he's like an expert on the Colombian insurgency. The U.S. obviously wants to know about what's going on in South America, so that's part of his day job is studying insurgency, and then he's turned that into a game, and that game is then has been used on occasion to train people who are intelligence experts in insurgency.
Wow.
So that whole side of wargaming is fascinating. Like it has real life application. And that's kind of another market that I want to get into while still having a commercial, I guess a civilian market for games. I mean, something as Werewolf is not going to tap into that market because Werewolf is alternate history, but you never know. I mean, there's still a chance for the military might learn something from it.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I mean, that's something you don't really realize when you play games is that games are used by government, by military to train people because it is a very efficient and effective and cheap way to train people rather than running a real life exercise. So, that whole
they are at the end of the day, they're simulations of what really goes on.
That's right. That's right.
Well, that's been fantastic. Thank you so much for all that discussion, Clint. That's been very interesting. And Mitch and I have been, specifically going down the rabbit hole of wargaming the last, I want to say, 18 months. So that's been a great discussion.
That was just our first play.
Fire in the Lake Turn 1, 18 months.
Fire in the Lake Turn 1. All right, we're going to move on with some announcements and news for those that are in Queensland and for those that want to travel to Queensland. We've got our Brisbane Game Day on June 3rd, I think.
Yes, June 3rd.
Saturday, June 3rd in Corinda. So tickets are on sale for that. We also have the Melbourne Game Day on June 17th at Preston Town Hall. Also tickets on sale for that. I'm going to be at the Brisbane Game Day teaching some games. A lot of our team is going to be in both events, so come and have a good time. Maybe Mitch is going to be there, so just be mindful of that. The other thing we want to talk about is the Board Game Barbecue Game Awards. This is the last week to send your nominations. You can find the links pretty much everywhere in all our social channels, Discord, Facebook, Twitter. So we've got 8 categories. We've got solo game, party game, lightweight, medium-weight, heavy game, artwork expansion, and obviously Game of the Year. I don't think I forgot anything there, but we have, I think, the last couple of categories to talk about really quickly today and cover them, which is best expansion and, of course, Game of the Year for 2022.
Save the big one for the best, right, Def?
Of course. But also save the expansion category for the man who plays the most expansions. That would be yourself, wouldn't it?
No. No, I don't. I honestly, it's not intentional. I don't avoid expansions as much as that. But I just don't get around to playing them enough. I get as much time as I can in on my base games, and then the expansions just tend to...
Do you guys think of expansions as kind of like, you have DLC in computer games, like downloadable content, and you like, if you were going to charge me $10 for this, why didn't you just put it in the original game?
Yeah, kind of a little bit. For
some games, it's like that. It's you could have just tacked this on the original.
Well, there's a couple of games that I won't use any names. There's a couple of games that I've got, and I may have loved the base game, and so I thought I'm going to get all the extra stuff and bits because I'm a bit of a completionist. And then when I play, I go, I couldn't be bothered with all the expansions because it's kind of little bits of extra stuff that I need to learn and remember every time I'm going to play. And so I kind of end up just gravitating back towards the base game because it's the easiest to get out and play. That said, some games, and it's probably the few more than the many, but there are some games that have amazing expansions that I would, once I've played them, I would never play the base game without them. So I think it really comes down to the expansion itself.
It does.
Yeah, I generally don't look too far into the expansion side of things.
Well, I can talk to the expansions A little bit. I'm not a massive fan of expansions, but I mostly see them as additional content for things I love rather than something that makes a game better. There are some that do that, and you wouldn't want to play the game after you do that without the expansions. But so two expansions I want to talk about really quickly is one is the Alien Invasion for On Mars, which I've played all the chapters now, and while the expansion is great, it's just On Mars. I love On Mars, so I'm perfectly happy playing On Mars with the base game. The expansion is great, but On Mars is great on its own. So I feel, that expansion is great, but an expansion that changed the game for me, which I nominated for this category, was The Rise of X for Dune Imperium, because I did feel that it improved an already great game. And so, just a couple of examples there.
Is it an expansion that fits into that category of I would prefer not to play the game without the expansion now?
No. I would still play Dune Imperium without the expansion, but if given the option, I would choose the expansion.
Yeah.
Do you guys recommend Dune Imperium? I haven't played it, but I have been considering getting it.
I love it. I think it's a great game. I think the balance between the worker placement spots and a little bit of deck building that it has is good enough. There's people that will say there's not enough deck building. I think it's pretty good. The solo mode is very, very good. In the previous, here's an interesting one for you, Clint. In the previous Brisbane Game Day, I played against Martin Wallace. And
you're kidding? Yeah, he lives there now, doesn't he? He lives in Queensland.
Yeah, he comes in our game days and plays his new games and stuff.
He is a very good designer. Yeah,
he told me that it is now his favorite game. It has surpassed Gaia Project to be his favorite game. So I almost
high praise.
I almost flipped the table. Gaia Project is my favorite game, so I almost flipped the table at him, but I resisted. So there you go.
And I won't share my opinion of Dune. We'll just move on.
Oh, no.
I didn't have a great experience with it, and I'm not saying that's for everyone. It's just a for me thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it was because I went in with sort of high expectations, particular sort of aspect, and that was missed. So I've got to find time to give it another crack and see, because ever since then I've had a different opinion to everybody else on the planet. So,
and what about Game of the Year, Mitch?
Well, before we touch on Game of the Year, I just wanted to say with the expansions very quickly.
Yes.
While you were talking about expansions, I was thinking, what have I got to sort of release this year or within 2022 that has expansions? And I thought,
Too Many Bones has expansions for the last 10 years, surely.
But Final Girl.
Ah, yes.
Does that count as expansions? I'm not sure if you're familiar with the Final Girl games.
No, I'm not. No.
It's a solo game. It's based around sort of horror movie tropes.
Oh, okay.
So in order to play the game, you have to have the base box, but you can't play the base box by itself. You then have to buy movies. So whether it's the Cabin in the Woods movie or the Aliens in the spaceship movie, so each different horror theme sort of genre is a different movie that you can buy, and they all come separately as, like you said, DLC content.
Yeah.
So is that considered an expansion, or is that considered part of the game?
It's kind of a sneaky way to sell your game. I don't know.
It's been very, very successful.
Yeah, because it's weird with board game marketing. You've got a number of different ways to sell it. Very few publishers now will just release a game and go, here is a full game that you can buy, and it's already going to be guaranteed to be made on this date, and you'll pay this amount of money for it on this day. It's usually now there's a Kickstarter or a pre-order, or there's going to be expansions, or there's stretch goals, or we're going to add this and this and this. So I don't know. I haven't made my mind up on whether I like that approach or not, of dividing the game up into a series of, iterations, selling them over. I don't know. I get, because if you're a publisher, you have to take a risk. If you want to get a game published to say 1,000, even in the wargame world, 1,000 copies is a lot of copies, and putting a lot of money down as the publisher, you might be putting down 100, 200 grand to make a product with a small print run. And if it doesn't sell, you've lost all the money. So you need to gauge the interest of the market to see if it's worth it. And same with expansions. you might be going, oh, well, should we release a second edition? Let's test the waters with an expansion. If enough people buy it, maybe
Sure.
a second edition. So a lot of it is, publishers are operating on very tight margins, and that's the market. So you've got to keep that in mind with a lot of game design stuff. It's not just about, we make a good game and then we just add stuff on. It's also, it might be a designer or a publisher testing the market to see if it's worth adding in, doing a second edition, and putting it all together. Or it's like, let's see if there's enough interest in this game, will a similar game sell well?
That's right. Well, lots of publishers do that.
It's not a problem. It's an industry where we're trying to sell a product, which is fine. We buy the products, and there's marketing. There has to be marketing. Otherwise, you can't sell it.
And
that's the expansion thing. Yeah,
I was going to say, I flip between whether or not I love or hate those marketing strategies based on how much money I have in my board game account at the time.
Yeah, exactly.
So, what about Game of the Year?
Oh, it's hard. Game of the Year.
Go ahead. We don't want to spiral, but go ahead.
Yeah, I think you were about to jump in with your Game of the Year, and I think I know what it is.
Yeah, I've said this multiple times.
I think I'd go with Endless Winter for me.
Okay.
Yeah, I really enjoy it. I think it's that sort of mid to heavy sort of realm that sort of hits a spot. I find like it's a game I can find quite consumable. It's easy enough to play. I like the theme. I like the production quality. Yeah, it's. I think I would go with that one.
What about you, Clint? Would you have a nomination for Game of the Year for 2022?
I haven't. For 2022. As in games that were released in 2022?
Yes.
Yeah, it's hard to remember which ones they are.
I haven't bought very many new games, to be honest. A lot of the games I buy are sort of classic, older war games. The one I bought that's probably the newest is Cascadia.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, which is sort of a fairly lightweight Euro, which I actually quite enjoy. I think that's actually a really very tight design.
Yes, we were both Mitch and I were very impressed when we got Cascadia. I remember the episode we spoke about it, and we thought this is going to be like Game of the Year when it was released. I think it was 2021, if I remember correctly. Yeah, we were very impressed.
Yeah, it's a very good design. I actually see it. There's a lot of little mechanics in there that I would actually like to use eventually in a war game setting, funnily enough.
Yeah, well, I've made my preference known in previous episodes, and I played this game yesterday as well with a new group of people, and they all sort of validated, the enthusiasm about it. So that my nomination was John Company, second edition.
John Company's good. Yeah,
fantastic. But yes, the nominations will close on the 7th of May, so please submit your nominations through the links you're going to find on our social media. And then we will take the most nominated games, and they will become our formal nominees. Our patrons will then vote, and all of this will come to a show of the Board Game Barbecue Awards night sometime in June. So get voting.
And one other piece of news we have to cover off, Def, is the giveaway that we've just announced. So we have crossed the threshold. We have passed 1,000 members on our Discord community, 4,000 members in our Facebook community, and 1,000 subscribers on our YouTube channel. So it's kind of weird how that all sort of happened at the same time. But to celebrate that fact, and because, as the guys said on the last episode, I went rogue one episode and said, screw it, we're going to give away heaps of stuff because I decided.
Can you send me some stuff, please?
Yeah. All you have to do is join the Facebook community, go onto the comment section, comment about what you like about the community, and tag a friend, and you will go in the draw to win some of those prizes. And some of those prizes are thankfully donated to us by the great people at Let's Play Games, who have donated some copies of Mists over Carcassonne, which is, I believe, the new co-op Carcassonne version, which I've heard is really good. Sarah said it was extremely hard, so that's good to know. We've also received from VR Distribution a copy of the Village Big Box. So anyone who's a fan of those old dry Euros, Village, I believe, falls squarely into that realm. I haven't played it myself. I saw a few photos of folks playing it. It looks really good, the new version, the new edition. And to cap it off, VR have also sent us a yet to be released. It's going to be one of the first available in the world, as far as I know. Only really available out there to content creators and those lucky enough to get their hands on it. So you could be one, and that is Archaeos Society, which, I don't know a whole lot about it at this point because it is so new, but there's some details up on Board Game Geek, and if you're into those Euro-style games, check that one out. Get in the draw to be a part of it, and maybe you can win.
Look, it sounds like something you'd be stupid not to enter. That's what it sounds like.
That's exactly
100%. Crazy. Absolutely bonkers not to enter.
Before we move on to the question of the pod, don't forget the big nationwide, big convention, board game convention, but we are going to be running next year in Sydney, PlayCon. So if you want to sign up and get some notifications when updates are coming out, please go to play-con.com and sign up there. It should be big. I want to say big.
Whereabouts in Sydney? Have you got a venue?
We do have a venue. It's going to be in Club Central in Hurstville.
Okay.
Which is it's hard to find a venue that will cater for the number of people that we're hoping that we're going to get. So the Club Central offered a lot of those things. It's right near a railway station. There's accommodation nearby, food. It's like one of those central to everything. Just come along and spend 3 days there playing games and just forget about the rest of the world sort of deal. So
sounds great. Yeah, that sounds awesome.
It's going to be awesome. It's going to be fantastic. And that's July 2024. So block out your calendars, folks. It's going to be crazy.
Block out the entire July of 2024.
Yeah.
We are all going to be there to meet everybody and play some games.
One other thing we need to talk about is that at the moment they've got the Board Game Geek Golden Geek Awards, which is awards they do for all the different things across gaming. And it just so happens that we have been nominated as Pod Game Podcast of the Year. So it's an amazing honor where I just cannot believe the community have got behind us and got us the votes to get nominated. But now is really important because now is when everybody has to go along and vote for us to win the award. It'll be just amazing to win the award. So if you're a member of Board Game Geek, go on to Board Game Geek, look for the Golden Geek Awards. You do have to have Geek Gold in order to vote. So if you don't have any Geek Gold and you still want to vote, then jump into Facebook or jump into our Discord server and someone will donate you some Geek Gold so that you can go on and vote for the Board Game Barbecue to win the Podcast of the Year award. It would be absolutely amazing. So that's one other thing that we needed to talk about. Yeah, it's been amazing.
We haven't covered any sizzles. How about we do that now?
You know, as a podcaster, it's quite difficult sometimes. You try and do an impromptu ad to get a little bit of a vibe going when you're recording, and the two people recording with you are completely brainless and don't pick up on your subtle clues. Have you ever had that happen, Adrian?
Well, I would have, but I was too busy shopping at adventgames.com.au.
Adventgames.com.au, they apparently have an absolutely amazing range of games to choose from.
They definitely do. I've actually bought a bunch of stuff from there, especially over the Christmas period. It's always really good service as well. Like, you can always message Advent and they will give you replies back pretty much straight away. Dean's an absolute great guy. He does community building stuff in Sydney. See him at game days.
Sorry I'm late, guys. I was just on my phone reading the latest newsletter from Advent Games. What are you guys talking about?
Well, funnily enough, we're talking about adventgames.com.au. They always are the first to have really good pre-orders available. If you're ever wondering about thinking, I want to get that game when it comes to Australia, head over to adventgames.com.au. You can almost be certain that they'll have a pre-order option there. You can lock it in and know that you'll be one of the first to get it as soon as it's available.
All right, what was that? We'll start again. I'm going to head over there right now.
It's www.adventgames.com.au.
I'm on there now. Done.
Mitch,
Me
what have you been
first.
playing lately?
Well, you said at the top of the show, Def, you said it's going to be interesting to do an episode with you and I on it and not talk about a game with chips in it.
Oh, no.
I'm going to do it.
Okay, go for it.
Because
Isofarian Guard.
I've only been playing one game lately because I cannot stop. I've played a ridiculous number of hours of this game already with Jules and my son Brad, both separately because it's only a 2-player game. But it is just consuming my life right now, and that is the Isofarian Guard by Sky Kingdom Games. I think Eric Bitterman is the designer. And this game is just, it's phenomenal. I know Def's going to sit there cringing because he's been wanting a copy ever since it started hitting doorsteps when being delivered. This thing came in a giant box that was 18 kilos. So super duper heavy. There's heaps of content in there. It's a fantasy adventure game. So it's set in the land of Isofar, funnily enough, and you play different members of the Isofarian Guard going around, traveling around the map and adventuring and doing different things. I don't want to spoil any of the storylines, so I'm not going to go into heaps of detail with what happens in it. But I will say, if you've ever played any sort of open world sandbox RPG style fantasy video game, this is just so you can just tell that there's so much influence from that sort of genre. You travel around the map. There's a main narrative storyline that you can follow along, and it will lead you through the story as that goes. You move a chip around as you advance the narrative. So it might say move the chip to location number 25. Now, you don't have to follow that to number 25. You've got the freedom to go to whatever node you want, travel anywhere on the map you want. There are side quests that you can get at the taverns. So you can go into a tavern, pick up a side quest, and then you'll have a quest marker. It will show you where the quest is that you're on, and you can go follow that quest. You can craft items. You can upgrade your gear. You can sell stuff in the towns that you've collected and drops off enemies. It's just so immersive. The combat system is phenomenal. I really, really enjoy it because it's easy. It's a bag builder. So as you go through building up your character, you get poker chips. That's where they come into this. There's these premium poker chips that come with the game. I think there's about 200 of them, maybe more. There's a load of these poker chips. And some of them are negatives, some of them are bonuses, some of them are upgrades, and depending on what happens, they'll go into your bag. So when you're having the combat on each turn, you will draw those chips out of your bag. That'll allow you to activate certain abilities that you have, activate powers, perform attacks, heal. It's wow, it's amazing. And one of the things too, if anyone has got the game or is considering getting the game, an option in the Kickstarter was to purchase the Foreteller narration. Now, I'm not sure if you guys have heard of Foreteller narration, but Foreteller is a company that do dramatic narration of narrative-based games. So whenever you follow the story, the narrative story, at each point it will say refer to chapter 2.1 or whatever it may be. You can go into your Foreteller narration app, choose chapter 2.1, and it will read you the story. So it sits there. They have great voice actors. They have amazing sound effects. It's super professional quality, so that if you're like me and you don't want to sit there reading pages, or you don't want to listen to the person on the other side of the table just read verbatim out of a book at you, you can use the Foreteller app, and it just totally puts you in the mood, puts you in the theme, and it immerses you in the game. And it's a knockout. It's really, really good.
You've played a lot of these types of games, Mitch. What is unique about this in terms of the immersion or the overlap between the theme and the mechanics? Because my opinion about these games, unless the mechanics somehow support the thematic immersion, the immersion, as good as it is, at some point it kind of falls flat and you kind of lose it. What is unique about this?
I think the uniqueness, I think that if I was to compare it to something, the closest comparison I can think of is like a Sleeping Gods.
Ah, yes.
If you've played that, where you kind of, you're traveling around to different points on the map, and then based on where you go on the map, then that will unlock a sort of a different sort of thematic little narrative sort of parcel of the story. And then if you can link those together, they'll form, something that, is some sort of continual arc of that storyline. The difference, I think, on this one is that you can't. It kind of feels the narrative side sort of feels a little bit on rails, because it travels along a sort of predetermined trajectory, as you would expect. And there are the odd branching sort of decision spaces where you can go, do the good thing, help the person you found on the side of the road, or don't help them, rob them, those sorts of things. But ultimately, it'll sort of ties back in and keeps you going along that sort of narrative direction. That's if you follow the narrative. But this game gives you the option to say, well, I don't really want to do that right now. I'm just going to go and spend some time checking out this part of the map and exploring what I can find over there, and maybe buy, get some goods and some items that I'll then take to the town and build myself a new set of armor. And that's totally up to you. You can kind of
does sound more
do
sandbox,
that. Yeah, very sandbox, but at the same time, it's not, because that narrative part is kind of guiding you. So it kind of gives you both of those sort of feelings in one, which I find really good. In terms of the gameplay mechanics, that's all in combat.
Yeah.
Oh well, yeah, combat, and then whatever the bad guys drop, you collect that, and you can then take that for crafting and things. There's also other stuff you can do and build. I don't want to, as I said, I don't want to spoil, but there's other components as well that give you like that in the game. I reckon there's probably 200 hours in this game. Like it's just enormous. There's from memory, you can test my memory now. There's 5 campaigns. I think 4 or 5. Don't quote me, but 4 or 5 campaigns. I think it's 5. And in each campaign, there is around about, I think there was 4 to 5 chapters within each campaign. And to give you an idea, I think campaign 1 took Jules and I about 6 hours, and that was the tutorial kind of campaign, right? So, and that was sort of just following along with what they wanted us to do in the narrative and stuff. So, you know, if you just follow the narrative and do all the campaigns, there is still so much content in this game, it's not funny. And that's not even including if you went off to do the side quests, if you went off to do there's different types of side quests. You have caravan quests, you have bounty quests that you pick up like off the bounty board in the taverns and things. So there's just so much content here. If you wanted to do all of it, you would be spending an absolute age doing it. So yeah, if that's your thing, awesome. If you don't like that thing, if you'd like a game that you can pack up, you know, open it up, play it for an hour and put it away, you're not going to like this game.
This is not it. So that was Isofarian Guard.
The whole sandbox genre is interesting because I find if you have sandbox at one end, the opposite end of the sandbox genre, I would probably call like knife fight in a telephone booth. Have you heard of that?
Yeah.
It's like
Cuba Libre.
Intense competition from turn 1 and you can't slip up even for a second or you die, that kind of thing. Which is, with wargame design, it's more towards the knife fight in a telephone booth rather than the sandbox end. And so I'm more on that end. Like the idea, which it sounds lovely what you've just described. Like I don't know if I could sort of wandering around and exploring sounds great. I think from a designer's point of view, that's a lot of work to flesh that out. As you know,
it's the amount of detail that they've put into this game is just off the charts. In terms of the content, as you say, and the wandering around, checking out what happens.
As you're talking about it, I'm googling it and looking at it. It looks awesome. Like it does look really, really cool. It's the idea that you don't have like a pressure to win. That's something is totally foreign to me.
There's definitely a pressure not to lose because it's freaking hard because the difficulty ramps up as well as you move from chapter to chapter. All of the mobs and things that you face and stuff as you travel around, because just traveling around, there's a mechanic for like random things to happen. Maybe random event, or maybe some bad dudes or whatever it is that just happen to ambush you on the path and things like that. And as the way that the game manages to keep it at a challenging level is as you advance through the chapters, all of the bosses, the enemies, and whatever else ramp up with you as well. Yeah. So when you first cross that threshold from chapter to chapter, it's designed really well in the sense that you've probably got to the end of the chapter you're on, and you're wailing on things a little bit, and you're like, these dudes are not hard. We're going to smash these guys, and you dispatch them pretty quick, and then you tick over into the next one, and you're like, we're getting whipped now.
Yeah.
And so it's like, we're not going to make it to town to heal. We're going to struggle here. So like you start having to run away from combats and things like that just to stay alive.
I like that idea of you have to not die for a while.
Oh yeah,
but aside from not dying, you could explore stuff.
The other thing that so when you die, you lose all your any experience that you haven't put into your stash at your base, any experience that you have, any money that you have, and all of your equipment that you're carrying with you, you lose if you die. So you kind of want to. There's a mechanism for saving, as you would expect in a video game style game. But you can only do that at inns and places where you can stop. And my son and I, during an event, we decided that we were presented with the portal. Do you want to walk through it or not? Of course, we were both like, yeah, let's walk through it. Let's go through the portal. That'd be great to do. Let's figure out what's on the other side of this thing. And it transported us to like the furthest part of the map. away from where our save point was and closed behind us. And we were like, oh, man, we've got all our gear with us. We hadn't put anything in the stash. And now we have to make it all the way back home, fighting mobs and beasts and who knows what else along the way. And we're not going to make it.
Yeah, that sounds like fun.
That's great.
Yeah, it was so good. And, like, we got there. Like, we had to spend a lot of what we had on healing and, just staying away from bad stuff. And we actually upgraded some of our gear on the way, which was kind of cool as well. But that moment we got back and we're like, oh my God, we made it. We were like so overjoyed, we're like dancing around the table and stuff going, I can't believe we're like, we had like 2 hit points left each sort of thing, and it was, it was just, it's awesome. It's a really good game. I have a fear that I'm just not going to get through it all. I know that there's so much there. It's just going to take so much commitment and time and effort. But you know what?
Sounds like you're enjoying it, Mitch, so that's what matters, whether you get through it all or not.
If I pack it up tonight, and I never, because it's literally still on my table right here. If I pack it up tonight and never play it again, I've had an awesome time with the time I've spent already, that's probably worth more than I invested in it anyway.
Yeah, for sure. All right, so that was Isofarian Guard. Thank you, Mitch. Clint, do you want to participate in this? Do you have any games that you've been actually playing, or have you been too busy playtesting Werwolf and the next designs?
I mostly playtest my own designs. That's probably what I spend most of my time doing. I have a shed, and I have usually 2 or 3 games set up on the go that I playtest.
Yeah.
But last week, I was able to finally play a full 6-player game of Twilight Imperium with other humans, which 6 people.
I thought you were going to say multi-handed.
Not solo, not a solo one, which I have done. But last week, had a 6-player game of Twilight Imperium, which I've been meaning to play for a very long time, and that was awesome. That was just one of the best gaming experiences you can have. And I say, anyone wants to have a proper multiplayer experience of a strategy game, that's the best you can get. It's so good. I don't know if I can see it in the shelf behind you, Mitch. I assume you have it. Mm-hmm. The 4th edition. And we came so close. It was one of those games. It's a classic sci-fi space opera, where we were 1 turn away from maybe winning. We built the War Sun, which is like the Death Star equivalent. We're moving our War Sun towards the middle of the map. And we just forced our main enemy off the central planet and just taken it. But then they played a card that allowed them to win. And it's just down to the wire. And there was constant negotiation around the table. There was trade, there was alliances, there was backstabbing and betrayal and all the kind of usual stuff you want in a game of Twilight Imperium. And we managed to play it all in about 5 hours, which is pretty quick.
Yeah,
and
which is pretty good.
We had a lot of new players too. There's probably only 2 or 3 of us that had played before, and the rest
right.
But we were able to play, and one of the guys that had never played it before actually won, which is great.
Yeah, right.
That's fantastic.
I think it's amazing, that game. The number of times you can play it, and you can play it for that many hours and that long, and it still comes down to 1 or 2 turns.
Yeah. I think it's on a tier with I guess just the all-time greatest strategy games would be Twilight Imperium, War of the Ring, and Star Wars Rebellion.
Yeah,
you got to play those if you're into board games. Even if you don't like wargaming or strategy or anything, you got to play those 3 because the design is so balanced and so every game is down to the wire, and it's all the thematic immersion and everything. I love all 3 of those. They're so good.
Did you use the expansion?
No,
Prophecy of Kings?
No, we have not used any expansions. We only played baseline 4th edition. So
last time I played it, we used the expansion and I didn't love it. I thought the pure base game Twilight Imperium was fantastic. Had a great time the few times I played it before that. The expansion, I don't know, messed with it a bit. It has these exploration tokens that I wasn't a fan of.
It doesn't need more stuff. It's got a lot of stuff.
No. It already, like, exactly that. You've summarized the game. It already has enough stuff. You don't need more in it.
And it's got like 17 factions or something like that. It's ridiculous. Yeah. You don't need any more than that. And that's
the goal, to play 17 factions solo.
Yeah. Eventually I want to play through all of them. Yeah. I was playing as the Barony of Letnev, which is like those Russian vampire guys, which I love. Yeah. They start with a dreadnought and they've got a really cool flagship, and they you can spend trade goods to reroll their die. They're really good at fighting, and you like early in the game, you want to use that to leverage other people and like intimidate them, say, "I will attack you unless you do this for me." And I was right next to the lion guys, the Emirates of Hakan. I had a good relationship with them. We'll trade with each other. Then they betrayed me, so Had to go and crush them, which is what you do. And it was funny because I went like a war game, and I had 2 other players attacked me, and in response I said, "I'm doing what the Austrians did to the Italians in 1916. I'm launching a punishment expedition against you because you betrayed me." That's what they call it, a punishment expedition. So I'm going to go and attack you just to put you in your place, and I'm going to come back home. But no, it's great.
That's awesome. Yeah.
You want to get theme and multiplayer mechanics and strategy and everything. It's so good, and that's, if you're a designer, that's kind of the holy grail, is one of those kind of games. It's something like that. Yeah,
it's awesome.
That's fantastic.
Yeah,
love Twilight Imperium. I want to play it a few more times.
If you want to, the closest like historical equivalent to that is the full.
Yes, please.
Which is not. It's not the same at all, but it approximates it in terms of the number of brightly coloured plastic on the board. Is if you play the Axis and Allies Global 1940, which is the biggest Axis and Allies game there is, which is really 2 games put together, and I've played that with 9 players. Where you have,
my god,
which is one person's Australia, which is cool, and you have like France and the Soviet Union, China, Japan, Britain, UK, Germany, Italy, all that. And that is, you've got tons and tons of pieces on the map and a lot of negotiation and working together as a team and all that kind of stuff. That's probably the closest historical game I know to Twilight Imperium. So,
okay.
But you got to buy 2 games. You got to buy like Axis and Allies Europe 1940 and Pacific 1940.
Yes, and combine them.
And put them together into one big giant game. And that is a full day. That is, you will not get that done in 6 hours. That is like a 8, 10, 12-hour game. But that's a lot of fun too.
Okay. Well, that was Twilight Imperium.
Are you gonna close this out with another massive big box game, Def?
I was going to, but I'm not. Because you've talked enough about games with chips today, I think, for the both of us. So for our listeners and for Clint that may be unaware, I was going to talk about Hoplomachus Victorum, which I have been playing this week. But I think I'm going to delay that for the next episode. I think I'm going to talk about something a bit different. I'm going to talk about what I feel is a classic Euro that I haven't played before. And I played it about 20, 30 times now, and I love it. And that is Ultimate Railroads, which is basically it's not really a separate game. It's a collection of games that started with Russian Railroads, which is about 10 years old Euro game. And then you had German Railroads, which was, a variation of that, and Russian, American Railroads, and a couple of Asian Railroads. So it is a collection of games that was released this last year, actually, or the year before that, in the United States and Europe, but it never made it to Australia until very recently. And the box is expensive for what looks like it's included, but because it actually includes 4 different expansions or 4 different games, I've been having a lot of fun with it. It is a very typical tight Euro game where you have these tracks that represent, real railroad tracks in Russia, and you've got these little pieces that represent the quality or the progress of these tracks. So the first one is a simple gray or beige token that you progress, and that means this is the wooden railroad being built. So every time you progress it, with doing different actions, but after that you can unlock the green bit, which is bronze or whatever, some other material, and after that you can unlock the gold, and after that you can unlock the silver and whatever. And every piece that moves across the railroad essentially means that you've upgraded that part of the track. So the better tokens can never go beyond the token that is in front of them, because that part hasn't been built yet. So if you haven't built the wooden bit of the railroad, you can't upgrade it to bronze.
Yeah.
And you gain points at the end of each round based on these combination of those tokens in their position. So if, the bronze is on spot 4, you gain 1 point per spot, so 4 points. But if the first 2 were gold, then gold gets you 4 points each, or something like that. And it is a very simple worker placement game where you place your workers in spots to progress some of these tracks, or get some bonuses, or get some engineers that give you access to some special abilities. There's also a factory track, or I think it's called factory track, that you progress on, and that's an alternative way of getting points and different abilities. And you got to buy locomotives that can reach a certain spot in the track so that you can actually score points. It becomes a very clever efficiency puzzle, even at a 2-player game. And it has this, old German design school type of approach where it is a point salad game, but it's not a game where you gain points no matter what you do. You have to really try and squeeze every, little drop of efficiency you can. The game only goes for 6 rounds, and it escalates in terms of scoring tremendously fast. So in the first round, you might score 4 points. In the last round, I've had a game where I scored 160.
Right.
Yeah.
So the game escalates in terms of how you progress, and so the efficiency is extremely important, because the earlier you get things done, the more rounds they're going to impact in terms of scoring. And I'm fascinated that this game is not discussed more, and I think the reason is it's always been extremely difficult to get a hold of. And this edition hasn't been different. It's been almost impossible to find in Australia until very, very recently. You just couldn't get it. You had to get it from, Europe or Germany or whatever. And
it's interesting that what you're saying, Def, sounds like what a good Euro game is basically, if you distill down the design, it's a series of bottlenecks. That's what
exactly.
it is. It's a series of bottlenecks that you're trying to overcome. And and I guess the word is also efficiency engine.
Yes, efficiency.
That's, you got a limited number of actions, and you're always constrained. You always want to do 20 things, but you can only do 5. And then
in this game, you want to do 20, and you can do 1.5. Like it is extremely tight.
Yeah,
and I think the variation that my journey with this game was, I was reluctant because of the price. The box is big because it has all 4 different games and additional modules in there. And I was like, well, is the game going to be any good? I played the game a couple of times. I was like, yeah, this is good. This is solidly designed, but not, $180 worth of it. And then I played it a bit more, and I was like, I'm starting to, really like this. And then I played one of the other games which is essentially the same game, but a different map with different tracks and different bonuses and different mechanics blended in. And that really, I think improved the perception I had about the game, because it demonstrated that they've really thought about this. They didn't just, produce expansions for the sake of it. Oh, the game will sell well, produce more stuff for it. Every map has been, because my brain works in this way, I try to do different things every time to see if I can progress well enough, or if I can be efficient with doing different things rather than doing the same thing. And every time it's been, extremely good experience. I think they must have play tested this to bits. And this does feel like one of these sort of old school classic Euro designs that will, I think, give joy to everybody that enjoys Euros, midweight Euros to play. The game is not hard. It's surprisingly easy to learn. So that is Ultimate Railroads, which is basically a collection of games, but the original game was Russian Railroads, published in 2012, I want to say, maybe 2013.
I don't think I'd do very well in the game after hearing you describe it, Def, because if it's all about efficiency...
You muted yourself immediately, so I guess not.
Exactly. My strengths lie in inefficiency. So,
well, that's what a sandbox is, isn't it? Sandbox.
Pretty much, yeah. You should go this way. No, I'm not going to go that way. I'm going to go this way.
That's fun. No. The game I'm working on right now, actually, I'm trying to do it as efficiently as possible in terms of this is a Gallipoli game, so like the Anzac Day landings, and I'm trying to do it with the tiniest number of pieces and components and rules that I can, like strip it down to the absolute bare minimum and have a 1 hour war game that's still playable. And that's what I'm trying to do. And I'm getting and no luck either, no dice. So pure deterministic combat.
Yeah, right.
So it's the opposite of a sandbox. It's like every single move you make So
counts.
You can lose. You can lose on one move, but
Yeah. If that's I would be doing that every time.
Yeah.
Well, there you go.
One of the weird things as a designer is you can throw more luck in as a kind of like you can use luck as a buffer for the player's ego in a way. You have lots of dice rolling. Your player goes, "Oh, well, the dice were bad. That's why I lost." If there's no dice and no luck, if you lost, that is your fault. You failed. Which is
I'm not a fan of games that prove how stupid I am. I know that already. I don't need it shoved in my face.
That's what I say luck is a buffer around the player's ego.
Oh, dear.
Very well. So those were the Sizzling Games. Thanks to both of you for those descriptions. I just want to jump in and say a massive thank you to our community and our Patreon supporters. You give us a lot of motivation to keep this show going. 240 episodes is a lot, and we have a lot of plans for the future. So thank you very much for your support. If you do want to support this podcast financially, you can do that at patreon.com/boardgamebarbecue. But there's other ways to support us. You can go and leave us a review or a star rating on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. And it makes a difference for us if you leave a review or leave a star rating. Thank you very much for that. You can also participate in our communities. We talk about games all the time, Facebook community or Twitter, Instagram, or YouTube, but also our Discord community where we are there and discuss on a daily basis. We arrange a lot of online games as well. And all of these links are in the show notes of this episode if you want to track them down. But thank you very much to everyone that supports the show. We really appreciate it. Right. Have we reached the dreaded oath swearing then?
I think we have. But
I think you need to put yourself back on mute, Mitch.
I probably do need to go back on mute because not only have I probably not achieved my oath, I can't even remember what it was.
In that case...
Let alone do it.
In that case, let me start, because in a moment of uncommon clarity, I remembered what my oath was before we stepped in to record.
Right.
And not only I remembered what my oath was, I actually made it. I fulfilled my oath, which was to play Frostpunk, the board game. So
yes.
Frostpunk is a game that's been talked about so much the last few months. It's already been, raved about, and most of the people that have played it, I don't think I've heard a single person say negative things about it. Overall, it's received fantastic reviews. I don't think that's a surprise coming from Glass Cannon Unplugged, and Adam Kopinski was involved in this. So I guess my comment there is that with Adam Kopinski, I think he's a brilliant mind when it comes to translating thematic experiences into games. I think Nemesis is one of the best examples in the market for this, the way the noise mechanic works and the way that brings into life the classic sci-fi horror or the classic sci-fi feeling of fear. Frostpunk does the same thing. It's obviously that re-implementation of a video game. I have not played the video game, so I was not in the camp of those video gamers that were super thrilled to get it in a board game version. But I played it now. It's great, but it's big, and it's also it's heavy. And when I say heavy, everybody knows I love heavy games. That's not what I mean.
No.
It's heavy in the way, Mitch, you will understand it because you have played this War of Mine.
Yes. I was going to say it's heavy because all of your people die eventually. That's what happened to me
because
when I played
the
it.
game begins and your first decision is, do I put all the children to work? Some of them will get sick and die, but everybody needs to work. These are the choices you make in every single turn. And I know it sounds funny because it's a piece of cardboard. It makes a difference in the experience of the game. And I think that's the intention here. But it does make me question how much am I going to play this? I think as a design, it's a formidable achievement, in my opinion, to translate that feeling. but is this a game I'm going to play 50 times? So
and with the
jury's
theme
still out.
and the heaviness of what goes on, it's not something you're going to come home and be like, the birds are singing on a Sunday afternoon, the sun's shining, and people are skipping down the street, and I'm going to jump into a game of Frostpunk and get miserable, because ultimately the world is pretty miserable, right? It's frozen wasteland. You're struggling to keep everyone alive. There's no heat. There's no, there's constant pressures from everything that you're living in. It's kind of got to be in the mood game, right?
Anyway, I achieved it though.
Yeah,
so
well done.
All fulfilled. The new oath was going to be Hoplomachus, but I've played that now, so I've run out of games I haven't played. I do have an oath I want to swear, but this is not an easy game to play. So I'm going to swear it anyway and see how we go. That's probably going to take a few months, so apologies in advance for that. I want to play one of the 2 games in my collection I haven't played yet, and that's Aeon Trespass Odyssey.
That's enormous, isn't it? That's that giant thing that you put next to your fridge, and your fridge was smaller.
That's it. That's the one. I have not played it yet. I have no idea.
You gotta see what this is.
Yeah. The first thing I said when I saw this game, I was like, how could they have possibly made any money making this? The list of people in the credits is enormous. The content in the game is ridiculous. And the art is fantastic. The writing is great. There's so much stuff in there. I was like, there's no way they made money with this. Like, there's no way. There's a reprint coming. So hopefully I'll manage to play it before then. But that's going to be my oath. I'm going to be bold. I'm going to swear an oath to play Aeon Trespass Odyssey. Mitch.
Okay. So while you were doing your oath, I did flick back a couple of our show notes and check what I had sworn an oath to do.
That was
and that was to teach a bunch of trick-taking games at the Sydney Game Day.
Yes, I remember that.
Yes. So given that I went to the Sydney Game Day, and I did teach a bunch of trick-taking games. So we started with Cat in the Box.
Okay.
Which is, look, to be honest, it's not my favourite. In terms of the trick-taking realm, because as anyone who's listened to the show recently will know, I've been on a bit of a trick-taking binge. But it's probably the most interesting mechanic of all the trick-taking games, because you have a hand of cards that are all black, and you choose what colour you want the card to be when you play it by placing one of your little tokens onto this board that have all the colours and numbers. So you can have all the colours and none of the colours at the same time.
Okay. Where
I think the cat in the box and the Schrodinger's cat thing comes into it, right?
Yeah.
But playing a card and then choosing the colour means that card and colour has been played. So you put your token down to indicate that no one else can play that card now because it's already been out. So, yes, it's definitely probably one of the most interesting mechanics out of the games that we played in terms of trick-taking. Also played another one called Voodoo Prince, which was quite enjoyable. It's very sort of standard trick-taking fare, except that you score points. With the first person to score to win 3 tricks is out, or whenever you score 3 tricks, you're out of the game.
Yep.
But you score points based on how many tricks everybody else has won at the point in time that you go out.
Oh, wow.
So you're you don't want to be first out, because if you're first out, you get 0 and no one else has got any tricks. So you don't want to win tricks to begin with. But also if you finish last, you don't get any points. So you want to win but not win at the same time, and kind of you want to finish somewhere in the middle, preferably sort of second last, but not last. So that's kind of cool. Then we played, I won't talk too much about Stick'em, because Adrian and Connor have talked about Stick'em, and that game is ridiculous. If you want to play a really simple card game that is just about knifing your friends directly in the face, play Stick'em, because it's not backstabbing, it's front stabbing. It's so mean. It's like super, super nasty. And it was an absolute laugh. I think we're playing it at my place between game day and the next day at like 2 a.m. It was mental. And then the third one that I played is another totally different tilt on trick taking, which is called Crime Hotel. And
Crime Hotel.
It's trick taking mixed with deduction. So each of the cards that you play represents a room in the hotel. And at the start of the game, you'll remove one of those cards, and then you go through the game playing tricks with the cards, and you're trying to deduce what is the room that the killer is in, which is represented by the card you took out at the start of the game. That card's taken out in secret. So, and depending on where you finish in the trick, either we win the trick, or if you come last or in the middle, will determine what you can do in terms of winning lets you make a guess as to I think that the killer is in this room or on this row or on this column, and you score points based on how accurate your guesses are at the end of the game. So kind of a really cool twist there on trick taking. It gives a total different sort of look at the whole thing. It even doesn't necessarily feel like trick taking, but then when you sort of break it down and go, no, we're playing tricks to win the right to then go into the dead action phase. So
you've actually fulfilled your oath.
I have.
God damn, that's great.
Yeah.
That's never happened before, so well done. What's the new oath, though?
So the new oath is I am going to swear an oath to...
Oh, you sound very determined.
To try and complete Chapter 2 of Campaign 1 of the Isofarian Guard.
Page 3 of subsection 4. Basically, I need to play 2 more minutes of this.
Sounds like reading a coin rulebook, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does.
Operation 4, section 3.5.3.
Okay. Very good. Clint, do you want to participate in this madness?
Yeah, sure.
Swear an oath for the next time you come on the show. We have to get you on the show when Werewolf gets published, where we've got a copy and we've played it, and then we can talk about our experience with the game.
We'll tell you about how we went, and you can tell us why we were stupid.
Yeah, that's right. Well, I do have an oath that you can hold me to, because I do have to get a playable prototype of Division Commander ready to send to England by June, because they're going to be using it at a UK military defence conference called DSET, Defence and Defence Simulation Education Training. Yeah, DSET. Okay. That's in Bristol, and it's sort of a combination of military people and like people in the defence industry that are going on to this conference. They want a prototype of my game to test out. Maybe with some guys coming over from King's College London, sort of guys who are going into the military as officers, and they're going to give it a play test. So I need to have a print and play prototype ready by June 6th to send there.
Okay. That's pretty tight time frame too.
I've got a month to do it, but I'll do it. I'll try and stick me to that.
Alrighty.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah, so that's my oath that I'm making here, that I'll have that ready to go by then so that they can play it and give me some feedback on it.
Cool.
That's fantastic. Yeah. Well, that is the end of the oath, and that is the end of the show today. Thank you very much to Clint Warren-Davey for joining us. That was a great discussion about Werewolf and Wargaming. Thank you for joining us. Before we go, do you want to tell our listeners how they can look you up or find some more information about your games?
Sure. So basically, follow me on Twitter. That's usually where I use any kind of social media, is just Twitter. I don't use Facebook very much. So if you follow me on Clint Davey 1 at Twitter, or if you want to buy my game, the one that's available at the moment is Werewolf, which is available at Legion Wargames, so legionwargames.com, and you'll find Werewolf on there. That's the one that's available for pre-order. And then eventually I'll have some other games coming out. But in particular, if you're like a history teacher or you're interested in wargaming in general, I post a lot of stuff on Twitter, and I give out a lot of games, just real easy, simple ones that you can print and play at home. So,
fantastic.
That's
thank you very much. Thank you, Mitch, for joining me tonight. That was a great chat.
Thanks for having me. Always fun.
See you all on the next episode. Thanks for listening.
Bye.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Was that hour and 40 minutes?
Yes.
Yeah.
Which is, we aim for an hour and a half. Sometimes we go a bit over. So
sometimes we go a little bit over.
98% of the time we go a bit over.